Chosen one, you ever feel like your soul was wrapped in chains nobody could see? Like you're suffocating in plain sight? While everyone around you thinks you're fine? Like your glow was dimmed on purpose by people who claimed they loved you? Listen to me, chosen one. You've been gaslit by your own family, discarded by friends who swore they'd ride or die. You've been the scapegoat, the problem, the too sensitive one in every room you've ever tried to belong in. And somewhere in the 3 a.m. silence, you've whispered the question that cuts deepest. Did God even see any of it? Here's what they never told you. Here's what the enemy prayed you'd never discover. You weren't rejected. You were recruited for something they never saw coming. This is not a coincidence. God didn't forget you. He was hiding you. Every betrayal, divine extraction. Every closed door, sacred redirection. Every silent night you cried alone, heaven was downloading something into your spirit that couldn't be interrupted by noise. You weren't being punished, beautiful soul. You were being positioned. They didn't break you. They revealed who they really were while God revealed who you really are. Your silence wasn't weakness. It was divine restraint. Your tears weren't defeat. They were sacred data. Your isolation wasn't abandonment. It was incubation. You didn't survive that hell for nothing. You survived because heaven still needs your light. And every single person who tried to dim it, they just announced to the spiritual realm that they recognized your power before you did. Thank you to every one of you who supports this message through super thanks. Your generosity isn't just seen, it's spiritual. You're not just giving. You're sowing light into soil that's been watered by tears. Whether you give or not, I'm grateful for your presence, your time, your attention, your faith. It matters more than you know. And if you're watching this right now, it's not by chance. It's by divine appointment. If this already hits your spirit, type, I feel the shift. I receive the power. You're not here by accident, because what comes next will shift everything you thought you knew about why you were attacked. And now, let's go deeper. They called you too sensitive when you felt their lies before they spoke them. They labeled your breakdowns as mental instability when your spirit was screaming warnings your mind couldn't yet decode. They weaponized your empathy, turned your gift into your curse, made you question the very radar that was trying to save you. But here's the truth they prayed you'd never discover. You weren't losing your mind. You were finding your mission. You're a divine glitch in a demonic system. You were born to crash what's fake. Every family gathering where you felt the undercurrent of poison while everyone smiled for photos. Every friendship that drained you while they called it support. Every workplace that suffocated your spirit while they preached about team culture. You felt it all because you were wired differently, coded differently, chosen differently. They saw something ancient in you, and it terrified them. Remember when you were a child, how you could sense the tension in a room before the adults even knew it was there. How you knew when someone was lying, even when their words sounded sweet. How you felt other people's pain so deeply, it became your own. That wasn't a flaw. That was your spiritual DNA activating. But they couldn't handle a truth teller in a house built on lies. They couldn't stomach a light bearer in a family addicted to darkness. So they did what the enemy always does when it encounters the divine. They tried to convince you that you were the problem. You're overthinking. You're too emotional. You need to toughen up. You're making something out of nothing. Every dismissal was an attempt to dim the frequency they couldn't control. But here's what Joseph's brothers didn't know when they threw him in that pit. Here's what David's family missed when they left him in the fields. Here's what Job's friends couldn't see when they blamed him for his suffering. The attack was the announcement. When hell comes for you personally, specifically, relentlessly, it's not because you're weak. It's because you're dangerous. They didn't target you because you were broken. They targeted you because you were becoming. Every betrayal was hell trying to abort your purpose before it fully formed. Every rejection was darkness trying to redirect your destiny before you discovered it. Every season of isolation was the enemy hoping you'd give up before heaven finished downloading your assignment. But you didn't break, did you? You bent, you bled, you questioned everything, but something inside you refused to die. That something was the part of you they could never touch, the part that belongs to eternity. They didn't attack your weakness, they attacked your awakening. See, weak people don't get the kind of targeted assault you've endured. Average souls don't face the coordinated campaign you've survived. Regular spirits don't attract the level of spiritual warfare that's been hunting you. You think it's coincidence that every time you tried to level up, something came to knock you down? You think it's random that every door you approached seemed to slam in your face? You think it's just bad luck that the people closest to you became your greatest source of confusion? No, beloved, that was strategy, hell's strategy, because they knew something about you that you were still figuring out. You carry the frequency that breaks generational curses. You hold the key that unlocks what they've kept chained. You are the antidote to the poison they've been feeding your bloodline for decades. That's why the attack was so personal. That's why the betrayal came from your inner circle. That's why the rejection felt so targeted. They weren't fighting you. They were fighting what you represent. The freedom they'll never taste. The peace they'll never know. The authentic power they'll never possess. Your very existence is a threat to every lie they've built their identity on. When you walk into a room, their masks start slipping. When you speak truth, their stories start cracking. When you choose healing over tradition, their whole system starts shaking. That's not weakness. That's warfare. And you've been winning battles you didn't even know you were fighting. Every night you chose forgiveness over bitterness victory. Every day you chose growth over comfort victory. Every moment you chose love over fear victory. They thought they were breaking you down. God was building you up. They thought they were writing your ending. Heaven was crafting your beginning. They thought they were teaching you your place. The Most High was revealing your purpose. You are not who they said you were. You are not what they tried to make you. You are not the limited, damaged, too much person they needed you to believe you were. You are the one they feared you'd become, the awakened one, the truth speaker, the chain breaker, the cycle stopper, the chosen one. And if you're still here, still breathing, still believing after everything they put you through, that's not survival. That's prophecy in motion. That sensitivity they mocked. It's your spiritual antenna picking up frequencies they can't even detect. That intensity they criticized, it's divine fire burning through everything that's not authentic. That too much energy they couldn't handle, it's the overflow of a soul connected to the source. If you've ever felt targeted for just being real, declare it with me right now. I was never weak. I was chosen. Say it until you feel it. Say it until you believe it. Say it until it rewrites every lie they ever told you about who you are. Because what comes next will prove that everything they did to stop you only prepared you for what they could never survive. And now that you know why you were attacked, it's time to understand why you were hidden. You know that silence, don't you? That deafening quiet that followed you through empty hallways, hollow conversations, and rooms full of people who couldn't see you bleeding in plain sight. 3 in the morning became your church. Your pillow, the altar where you laid every unanswered prayer, where you whispered, "God, where are you?" into the darkness that seemed to swallow your voice whole. They told you the silence meant you were forgotten, that God had moved on to more worthy vessels, that your cries bounced off heaven's ceiling like stones thrown at bulletproof glass. But what if I told you they lied? What if every night you spent alone was God clearing the frequencies? What if every unanswered prayer was heaven saying, "Not yet, beloved. Not until you're ready for what I'm about to download"? Heaven doesn't train soldiers in crowds, it trains them in caves. David knew this. 40 years in the wilderness wasn't punishment, it was preparation. While his brothers played politics in the palace, God was writing warrior songs in his DNA. While they networked, he learned to hear the voice that matters most. Your isolation wasn't abandonment, it was divine incubation. Think about it. Every prophet, every world changer, every soul who shifted the atmosphere, they all had their wilderness season. Moses, 40 years in silence before the burning bush. Elijah, fed by ravens while the kingdom starved. Jesus, 40 days in the desert before he unleashed power that split history in half. You thought you were invisible, but God was writing your strategy in the dark. Every night you cried yourself to sleep. Heaven was downloading warfare tactics your enemies couldn't intercept. Every day you woke up empty. The Most High was installing new software your haters couldn't hack. They thought you disappeared. No, you were incubating. Like a butterfly in the cocoon, your old self had to dissolve completely before your true wings could form. The silence wasn't your grave, it was your metamorphosis chamber. And while they celebrated your absence, while they threw parties over your pain, while they rewrote history to make themselves the heroes of your story, God was uploading something into your spirit that would make their lies irrelevant. You weren't broken in that silence. You were being rebuilt, from the ground up, bone by bone, dream by dream, until the foundation was so solid, their future attacks would bounce off like pebbles against a mountain. You didn't break in the silence, you became a blueprint. Joseph knew this truth. 13 years in a pit, in slavery, in prison, all while God was writing Pharaoh's deliverance through his pain. Every tear was data, every betrayal, intel, every setback, set up for a comeback that would feed nations. Your silence taught you languages your enemies will never speak. The language of endurance when everyone else quit. The language of faith when evidence screamed otherwise. The language of love when logic demanded bitterness. The language of wisdom when the world worshipped knowledge. But here's where it gets powerful. chosen one. That same silence that nearly broke you, it's about to break every lie they told about you, every whispered rumor, every twisted story, every character assassination they performed while you weren't there to defend yourself. All of it is about to crumble under the weight of who you've become in the quiet. They thought your silence meant surrender. They didn't know it meant you were downloading a frequency that would expose every frequency they were operating on. Your training ground is about to become their judgment seat. Because when someone trained in the cave steps into the light, they don't just glow, they burn. They don't just speak, they prophesy. They don't just walk, they shift atmospheres. You spent years learning to hear God's voice above the noise. Now you're about to discover what happens when that voice speaks through you. The same mouth that whispered desperate prayers in the dark is about to declare truths that shatter strongholds. The same hands that shook with abandonment are about to carry anointing that breaks chains. The same heart that ached with loneliness is about to overflow with a love so pure it heals generations. Say it with your spirit. God was building me in the silence. Let that hit your bones. Feel that shift in your chest. That's not emotion. That's recognition. Your spirit remembering what your mind forgot. That every season of silence was a season of construction. God wasn't distant. He was deliberate. He wasn't ignoring your prayers. He was answering them in ways your enemies couldn't sabotage. While they had access to your outer world, heaven was renovating your inner world. While they controlled the narrative around you, the Almighty was rewriting the narrative within you. And now, beautiful soul, now it's time to step out of the cave. Because what you learned in the silence is about to echo in ways that make the earth tremble. What you received in the darkness is about to blind every eye that underestimated your light. They thought the silence was your ending. They had no idea it was your beginning. And what comes next will prove that every night you cried alone was actually heaven's way of watering the ground for a harvest they never saw coming. They told you you were too intense, too paranoid, too deep, too much. But what if you were just awake? What if your overthinking was actually overseeing? What if your sensitivity wasn't weakness, it was radar? What if every time you felt that knot in your stomach around certain people, every time the hair on your neck stood up in seemingly innocent conversations, every time you sensed the shift before anyone else did? What if that wasn't anxiety? What if that was prophecy? You felt the energy leave before they ghosted. You saw the snakes before they hissed. You knew the betrayal was coming 3 conversations before it landed. And when you tried to warn others, when you tried to name what you were sensing, they looked at you like you'd lost your damn mind. You're reading too much into it. You're being dramatic. Not everything is that deep. But your spirit was screaming a different truth. Remember Joseph? His own brothers called him a dreamer before they threw him in a pit. They mocked his visions until those same visions saved their lives. David was anointed king while his family rolled their eyes. Elijah heard God in the whisper while everyone else was looking for earthquakes. The chosen always see first, and the sleeping always call the awakened crazy. But here's what's really happening, beautiful soul. You weren't losing your mind. You were losing the programming. Every label they slapped on you, paranoid, unstable, too sensitive, was their fear talking. Because deep down, they knew you were picking up frequencies they couldn't even hear. They knew you were seeing patterns they were too comfortable to acknowledge. Your intuition was inconvenient for their illusions. Your clarity was dangerous to their denial. Your truth was threatening their facades. So they tried to convince you that you were the problem, that your gift was a glitch, that your sight was sickness. But every single time you doubted yourself, every single time you questioned your own perception, every single time you dimmed your discernment to keep the peace, a little piece of your divine download got static. They didn't just gaslight you, they tried to unplug you. Because a sleeping chosen one is manageable, but an awakened one is unstoppable. And you've been awakening this whole time, haven't you? Even when they made you feel crazy for it, even when they made you apologize for seeing, even when they convinced you to doubt the very gift that was trying to protect you. You saw the energy vampires before they drained you. You felt the manipulation before it trapped you. You sensed the fake love before it used you. And instead of trusting that divine radar, you let them convince you it was paranoia. Because here's what they never told you about being chosen. Your spiritual sensitivity isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. Your ability to feel what others miss isn't dysfunction, it's divine function. You weren't given these spiritual antennas to fit in with people who can't even feel their own pain. You were given them to navigate through a world that's forgotten how to discern. But while you were doubting your gift, while you were apologizing for your awareness, while you were trying to numb the very thing that was meant to guide you, something beautiful was happening. Your spiritual sight was getting sharper. Every betrayal you felt coming but ignored, that taught you to trust your gut. Every fake friend whose mask you saw through, that trained your discernment. Every toxic situation your spirit warned you about, that calibrated your spiritual radar. They thought they were driving you crazy, but they were actually driving you awake. And now you see everything. You see the games, you see the patterns, you see the energy behind the words, you see the motives behind the smiles, you see the fear behind the attacks. You mocked what they couldn't decode, and now that mockery is haunting them. Because every time they called you crazy, every time they dismissed your insight, every time they made you question your own perception, they were actually confirming it. Their resistance to your truth was proof of your accuracy. You think they're not watching you now? You think they're not checking to see if your crazy predictions came true? You think they're not secretly admitting to themselves that maybe you saw something they couldn't? They're haunted by your clarity. They're disturbed by your peace. They're confused by your silence. Because the same person they tried to convince was losing it is now the most grounded, centered, clear-eyed soul in their vicinity, and that terrifies them. Your awakening is their worst nightmare. So here's your new truth, chosen one. You were never crazy. You were calibrating. You were never unstable. You were upgrading. You were never too much. You were exactly enough to see through what everyone else was too asleep to notice. Your sensitivity is sacred. Your intuition is infallible. Your ability to see is your superpower. And now that you've stopped apologizing for it, now that you've stopped dimming it, now that you've stopped letting them convince you it's a curse instead of a gift, watch what happens. I see clearly now. I reclaim my mind. Because what's coming next will show you exactly why God gave you eyes that see in the dark, and why your enemies are about to discover what it feels like to be seen by someone who can't be fooled anymore. The veil isn't just lifting for you, beautiful soul. It's about to be ripped away from everyone. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and suddenly remember something you forgot you knew, like muscle memory kicking in from a past life you never lived but somehow recognize? That's what's happening to you right now. This isn't just knowledge downloading into your spirit. This is remembrance, ancient code reactivating, divine DNA unzipping itself from generations of suppression. Your spirit holds scrolls older than your suffering, documents written before your first heartbreak, blueprints drafted before your first betrayal. And right now, in this very moment, heaven is breaking the seals. They told you to forget. Your family said get over it. Your friends said move on. Society said be realistic. But what they were really saying was forget who you are. Because they knew. Oh, they knew. The same people who called you too much recognized something in you that made them feel like not enough. The ones who said you were living in a fantasy were terrified you might actually manifest it into reality. They buried you in noise, hoping you'd forget the light you came from, distracted you with drama so you wouldn't hear the whispers of your own divinity, fed you lies about your limitations until you started parroting them back like gospel. But memory is roaring now. You remember now, don't you? That feeling you had as a child. Before the world convinced you it was imagination, that knowing that you were different, special, chosen. They called it daydreaming. God called it preview. You remember the moments when you knew things you shouldn't know, felt things before they happened, saw through people's masks before they even put them on. That wasn't coincidence. That was inheritance. Joseph knew he was destined for greatness before his brothers threw him in the pit. David was anointed king while he was still watching sheep. Esther was chosen for such a time as this before she even knew there was a time coming. Sound familiar? Every prophet started with a knowing they couldn't explain. Every chosen one began with a memory of something they'd never experienced but somehow recognized as home. And right now, that memory is breaking through the concrete they poured over your spirit. You're remembering the power they made you forget, the authority they convinced you to doubt, the light they taught you to dim. This isn't a new level you're reaching. This is an ancient return you're making. You're not becoming someone new. You're remembering who you've always been underneath the layers of other people's fear, judgment, and control. That intuition they called paranoia, that's prophetic sight. That sensitivity they called weakness, that's spiritual radar. That intensity they called too much, that's divine frequency. Every time you felt like you didn't belong, you were right. You weren't made for their systems. You weren't designed for their boxes. You weren't created to fit into spaces built by people who forgot their own power. You were made to remember what they chose to forget. You were born to carry what they were too afraid to touch. You were chosen to unlock what they spent lifetimes trying to bury. And right now, in this very second, every chain they wrapped around your memory is snapping. Every lie they told you about your identity is crumbling. Every limitation they convinced you to accept is dissolving. Because you can't suppress divinity forever. You can't bury royal DNA under peasant programming. You can't convince a lion it's a sheep just because you put it in the flock. The king's blood always remembers the throne. This is why they're nervous now. This is why they're watching. This is why they're trying to pull you back into old patterns, old relationships, old versions of yourself that they could control. Because they can feel it. The shift, the awakening, the return. They can sense that you're remembering something they prayed you'd never recall. Something that makes their illusions impossible and their control obsolete. You're not just healing from trauma. You're downloading from eternity. You're not just finding yourself. You're finding the blueprint heaven wrote for you before time began. You're not just getting stronger. You're getting dangerous to every system that depends on your amnesia. Say it out loud right now. I remember who I am. That alone will shift something in your atmosphere. Feel that? That electricity in your chest? That's not emotion. That's recognition. That's your spirit confirming what your mind is just starting to accept. You are not who they convinced you to be. You are not what your circumstances suggested. You are not limited by what your environment provided. You are exactly who God said you were before the world got a vote. And now that you're remembering, everything changes. Every door that was closed starts to crack open. Every relationship that drained you starts to feel foreign. Every limitation that felt permanent starts to feel like a temporary inconvenience. Because when divine memory awakens, the impossible becomes inevitable. When ancient power remembers itself, the kingdom of heaven starts manifesting through your everyday life. When you stop asking, why me, and start declaring, here I am, the universe has no choice but to make room for what you're carrying. This is not the beginning of your journey. This is the resumption of your assignment. This is not your breakthrough. This is your homecoming, and what's about to unfold through you. They never saw it coming because they forgot what you're remembering right now. But now you know, and knowing changes everything. Because once you remember who you are, you start to understand why they fought so hard to make you forget. And that revelation, that's where your real power begins to show itself. You know what they saw when you were breaking down? Just another casualty, another weak soul that couldn't handle the pressure. They watched your tears like spectators at a demolition betting on when you'd finally collapse completely. But here's what their blind eyes missed. They weren't watching a breakdown. They were witnessing a breakthrough disguised as devastation. Every tear that fell, that was heaven washing away the illusion. Every night you couldn't sleep. Your spirit was downloading codes they'll never understand. Every moment you thought you were losing your mind, you were actually losing their programming. They saw your tears, not knowing they were watching a prophecy unravel. You remember that version of yourself, don't you? The one who tried so hard to keep everyone happy, who bent over backwards for people who wouldn't cross the street for you, who absorbed their chaos like a sponge, thinking that's what love looked like. That version was beautiful, precious, but she had to die. He had to break. Because God was never trying to fix that version. He was trying to birth the real you from the ashes of who you thought you had to be. Joseph didn't become prime minister while he was comfortable in his father's house. David didn't get his crown while he was still playing nice with Saul. Job didn't receive double until he lost everything single. Your pain wasn't punishment, chosen one. It was preparation for a power they never saw coming. They laughed at the storm you cried in. But now, that same storm is your crown. See, they thought they were watching you drown, but God was teaching you to walk on water. They thought the pressure would crush you, but pressure creates diamonds. They thought the fire would consume you, but fire only burns what was never meant to survive. Every betrayal was a surgical removal of dead weight. Every rejection was divine protection from contamination. Every loss was heaven making space for something greater. You weren't falling apart, you were falling into place. The old you would have stayed, would have explained, would have begged for understanding from people who had already made up their minds about your worth. But this new you, this version that rose from the rubble of your former life, this you doesn't explain, you demonstrate. This you doesn't beg, you become. This you doesn't chase, you attract. Because here's what happens when someone survives what should have destroyed them. They stop playing by the rules of people who couldn't even survive their own lies. You've been through hell and came back glowing. That glow, it's not just healing, it's holy fire. And holy fire doesn't just warm, it burns through everything fake in its presence. That's why they're uncomfortable now. That's why they avoid your energy. That's why they can't look you in the eye anymore. It's not because you changed. It's because they can feel what you've become. Your pain didn't just shape you. It summoned you. Let me tell you something about transformation that they don't teach in Sunday school. Real transformation doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in contradiction. It happens when everything you thought you knew about yourself gets shattered and you have to rebuild from pieces they couldn't break. Your breakdown wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakthrough, a breaking open, a breaking free. You broke free from their definition of your worth. You broke free from their limitation of your purpose. You broke free from their prediction of your future. And now you're operating from a place they can't reach, can't manipulate, can't dim. Because pain is the ultimate portal. It's the doorway between who you were and who you're becoming. And the deeper the pain, the more powerful the portal. You didn't just survive trauma. You transmuted it. You turned your wounds into wisdom, your scars into scripture, your breakdown into breakthrough. That's not just resilience. That's resurrection power. And resurrection power doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't apologize for shining. It doesn't dim itself to make others comfortable. Resurrection power rises, and it rises loud. So when they look at you now, really look at you, they're not just seeing the person they tried to destroy. They're seeing the force they accidentally created. They're seeing proof that their worst wasn't strong enough to stop God's best. You're walking evidence that what was meant for evil, God turned for good. You're living testimony that the pit they dug for you became the foundation for your palace. You are the plot twist they never saw coming. The same mouth that spoke curses over your name is now silent in the presence of your transformation. The same hands that pointed fingers are now shaking with the recognition of what they touched. They poked a sleeping giant. They triggered a volcanic awakening. They thought they were breaking a person. They were actually breaking open a portal. And now, that portal is you. If pain brought you here, say this now: my wounds were portals, and I walked through. Speak it into the atmosphere. Let it resonate in your bones. Because this isn't just a confession, it's a declaration of war against every lie that said your pain was proof of your failure. Your pain was proof of your calling. And now that calling is rising. It's no longer buried under their opinions, their judgments, their limitations. It's rising like smoke from a fire that can't be put out, rising like truth from a grave that couldn't hold it, rising like a phoenix that was never really dead, just waiting for the right moment to spread its wings. That moment is now, because what's coming next will show you exactly how that portal you walk through isn't just your exit from their prison, it's your entrance into a power they never wanted you to discover. They used to silence you with their stares. Remember that? The way they'd look at you like you were too much, too intense, too awake for their comfort zones. They trained you to shrink, to apologize for taking up space, to dim your light so their darkness could feel safe. But something shifted, hasn't it? You walk into rooms now, and the energy changes before you even speak. People who used to dismiss you suddenly can't look away. The ones who mocked your sensitivity now flinch when you enter their space. They feel something they can't name, something that makes their masks slip and their lies tremble. You don't have to shout anymore. Your presence speaks a language their ego can't understand. See, when God unlocks the weapon of your authentic energy, it doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It moves like David's stone, silent, precise, devastating. You've been walking in this power for weeks now, maybe months, and you're just starting to notice it. The way conversations stop when you arrive, the way guilty people suddenly get nervous around you, the way pretenders start over-explaining themselves in your presence. You walk into a room and demons flinch. That's not metaphor, chosen one. That's spiritual mathematics. Your energy has been purified by pain, sanctified by betrayal, and weaponized by the very silence they forced you into. Every tear you cried in secret became a sword. Every night you questioned your worth became armor. Every moment they made you feel invisible became the cloak of divine mystery you now wear. They thought they were breaking your confidence. God was forging your frequency. Remember how they used to make you explain yourself, justify your reactions, defend your boundaries, prove your worth over and over until you were exhausted from your own voice? Remember how they'd twist your words, gaslight your experiences, make you question your own reality? You're not explaining anymore, you're embodying. The woman who used to beg for understanding now carries understanding like a sword. The man who used to plead for acceptance now radiates acceptance of his own divine nature. You've stopped performing for people who were never your audience. You've stopped translating your depth for minds that were always too shallow to hold it. And they hate it. They hate that you've gone quiet but somehow gotten louder. They hate that you've stopped fighting but somehow won the war. They hate that you're not angry anymore, you're dangerous. Not dangerous to innocent people, but dangerous to lies, to manipulation, to every system built on making beautiful souls believe they're broken. Like Elijah on Mount Carmel, you've discovered that real power doesn't need to be loud to be lethal. When you stopped trying to prove you were right, you became the proof. When you stopped defending your truth, You became the truth that defends itself. You are no longer a mirror. You are a mirror that burns. Feel that. That shift happening in your chest right now. That's not just emotion, that's recognition. Your spirit recognizing what I'm saying because you've been living it. You've been watching people squirm in your presence and wondering why. You've been noticing how your silence makes them confess things you never asked about. You've been seeing how your peace agitates their chaos. That's the weapon. That's the power God unlocked when He pulled you through that fire. You don't have to curse your enemies, your joy does it for you. You don't have to expose their lies, your truth makes them expose themselves. You don't have to fight for your place, your energy creates the space everywhere you go. But here's where it gets dangerous for those who wronged you. You're not using this power for revenge. You're not wielding it to hurt. You're simply being it. And that's what's terrifying them. They could handle your anger. They could manipulate your pain. They could twist your reactions. But they can't handle your peace. They can't manipulate your power. They can't twist your silence. Your very existence has become their judgment. Your healing has become their mirror. Your elevation has become their earthquake. Every room you enter now becomes a courtroom where lies get exposed without you saying a word. Every conversation becomes a confession booth where guilty hearts reveal themselves. Every silence becomes a sermon that preaches truth louder than any voice ever could. You thought you lost your voice when they silenced you. God was giving you a frequency that cuts through dimensions. They wanted you voiceless. Heaven made you a voice for the voiceless. They wanted you powerless. The Almighty made you a power source for the powerless. They wanted you invisible. The Creator made you impossible to ignore. And now, right now, as you feel this truth settling into your bones, you understand why they fought so hard to keep you down. They saw this coming before you did. They felt this power in seed form and tried to burn the field before the harvest. But you can't stop what God has planted. You can't silence what heaven has amplified. You can't dim what the divine has ignited. If you've been seeing the shift, speak it. My energy is the evidence. Type it now. Let the universe know you've received the download. Let your enemies know their time of enjoying your dimmed light is over. Let yourself know that you were never broken. You were just being prepared for this moment when your presence alone would become the weapon that fights every battle you used to fight with words. Because what comes next will show you exactly how this power moves through your daily life and why the people who once controlled you are now terrified to be in the same room with the force you've become. The weapon isn't what you say anymore. Chosen one. The weapon is who you are. You know what's driving them insane right now. They can't figure you out anymore. See, they used to have you mapped. Predictable. They knew exactly which buttons to push, which wounds to poke, which words would send you spiraling back into that dark place where you questioned everything about yourself. But something shifted, didn't it? Now when they look at you, they see something that doesn't compute, something that makes their algorithms glitch, something that breaks their little formulas for how to control you. You're not a quote. You're a scroll they can't read, and that terrifies them. They study you like you're some ancient artifact they found buried in ruins, trying to decode what happened, trying to reverse engineer your transformation, watching your posts, analyzing your words, measuring the distance in your silence. But here's what they'll never understand. God didn't just heal you. He encrypted you. Every tear you cried in secret became a line of code they can never crack. Every night you prayed through the pain, heaven was installing software they don't have access to. Every betrayal that should have destroyed you, it became part of your divine programming. Your voice carries codes. Your silence triggers awakenings. You speak now and something ancient stirs in people's spirits. You don't even have to say much. 3 words from you carry more weight than their 1,000-word manifestos. Because you're not speaking from your head anymore. You're transmitting from your scars. And your silence, Lord, your silence is louder than their screaming. They remember when your silence meant they won. When it meant you were broken, defeated, too hurt to fight back. But this silence is different. This silence has teeth. This silence carries prophecy. When you go quiet now, they panic. Because they know you're not retreating. You're receiving. You're downloading instructions they're not privy to. You're tuning into frequencies they can't even hear. Remember Joseph in that pit? His brothers thought they buried his dreams. But God was uploading the blueprint for his destiny while he sat in darkness. Every betrayal was just another line of divine code being written into his spirit. That's you right now. They study you, try to mimic. But God encrypted your glow. Watch them try to copy your energy. Watch them steal your words, your style, your whole vibe. They see how people respond to you now, and they want that same magnetic pull. So they study your posts like they're cramming for finals. They try to bottle your essence and sell it as their own. But here's the thing about authentic power. It can't be copied. It can't be faked. It can't be manufactured in some social media laboratory. Your glow comes from walking through fire without losing your faith. Your presence comes from being buried alive and choosing to bloom anyway. Your authority comes from letting God rebuild you from the inside out. They can imitate your words, but they can't duplicate your wounds. They can copy your message, but they can't replicate your scars. They can steal your style, but they can't access your story. And every time they try, it falls flat, because you're not performing anymore. You're being, and being can't be borrowed. You've become the living proof that God doesn't waste pain. Every time they see you rising, every time they witness your peace in the middle of their chaos, every time your joy cuts through their manufactured drama, it's a reminder of everything they chose not to become. You are walking evidence that transformation is real, that divine justice exists, that sometimes the very people who tried to bury you end up becoming the audience for your resurrection. You are a sacred text written in thunder. Every step you take now rewrites their understanding of power. Every boundary you set revises their definition of strength. Every time you choose peace over revenge, love over bitterness, truth over comfort, you're scripting a new narrative that their limited minds can't process. You've become a walking scripture they can't interpret, a prophecy in motion they can't predict, a love letter from heaven written in a language their darkness doesn't speak. They thought they knew your chapters. They thought they could write your ending. But God took the pen from their hands and started writing poetry with your pain. Now every breath you take is a verse they never saw coming. Every word you speak is a revelation they can't control. Every move you make is a line in a sacred text they're not worthy to read. You're not trying to be mysterious. You're just walking in truth so rare, so authentic, so divinely orchestrated that it reads like fiction to people still living in lies. And the beautiful part? You're just getting started. This power that's unlocking in you, this authority that's rising, this divine frequency that's coming online. It's not just for you. It's for every other chosen one still sitting in their pit, wondering if God really sees them. You're becoming the proof they need, the evidence they're searching for, the living testimony that resurrection is not just possible, it's inevitable. Write this in the comments. I am not to be decoded. I am to be witnessed, because that's exactly what you are. Not a puzzle to be solved, but a miracle to be marveled at. Not a problem to be fixed, but a prophecy to be fulfilled. And those who tried to silence your voice, they're about to discover that some sounds can't be muted, some lights can't be dimmed, some forces can't be contained. You've become the storm they never saw coming, the earthquake they never felt building, the revival they never knew they needed. And what's coming next will make everything you've walked through look like preparation for the main event. You know what's wild about betrayal? How it makes you question everything except the lies they told you about yourself. They said you were the problem, called you dramatic when you called out their darkness, labeled you bitter when you wouldn't swallow their poison with a smile, made you the villain in every story they told because they needed someone to blame for the chaos they created. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. Your healing became their judgment, not because you wished anything on them, not because you prayed for their downfall or plotted revenge in the midnight hours when sleep wouldn't come. No, beautiful soul. Your healing became their mirror, and mirrors don't lie. Every boundary you built exposed their entitlement. Every wound you closed revealed their empty spaces. Every tear you dried showed them the drought in their own spirit. You didn't have to say a word. Your glow became their conviction. They thought they were watching you fall apart. Turns out, they were witnessing the dismantling of everything false inside you. While they celebrated what they thought was your breakdown, heaven was orchestrating your breakthrough. You don't have to expose anyone when you become the exposure. Your peace is their punishment. Your joy is their judgment. Your silence is their sentence. Remember Job? They stripped him down to nothing, thinking they were watching a man lose everything. But Job wasn't losing. Job was being refined. Every loss was peeling back another layer of the ordinary to reveal the extraordinary underneath. That's you. That's what they couldn't see through their jealousy-tinted glasses. They thought you were finished. Turns out, you were the final test. The last chance the universe gave them to choose love over envy, truth over lies, light over the shadows they were comfortable hiding in. And they failed. Every time they chose to spread rumors instead of asking if you were okay. Every time they chose to celebrate your pain instead of offering their hand. Every time they chose their ego over your heart. They were writing their own verdict. You weren't just surviving their attacks. You were becoming the standard they couldn't reach, the frequency they couldn't match, the authenticity they couldn't fake. Watch this miracle unfold. Watch how your elevation becomes their education, not through your words, but through your walk, not through your explanations, but through your transformation. Your existence is the audit. Your joy is the sentence. They can't understand how you're thriving after everything they put you through, how you're glowing when they tried to dim your light, how you're standing when they designed your fall. Here's what's really breaking them. You didn't become bitter. You became better. You didn't become cold. You became wise. You didn't become vengeful. You became victorious. While they're still rehearsing the same old drama, you're writing new chapters. While they're stuck in the past, picking at old wounds, you're building futures they can't even imagine. Joseph didn't have to hunt down his brothers. His position spoke for itself. David didn't have to chase Saul. His anointing was his answer. Elijah didn't have to argue with Jezebel. His power was his proof. That's what's happening to you right now. Your elevation is their revelation. Your breakthrough is their wake-up call. Your freedom is their mirror, and they can't look away even though it burns. They said you were too sensitive. Now they're drowning in the very emotions they told you to suppress. They called you unstable. Now their whole world is shaking. They said you were the problem. Now they're facing problems they can't blame on anyone else. You see, when someone is used to feeding off your light, your absence feels like death to them. When someone is addicted to your chaos, your peace becomes their torment. When someone built their identity around your brokenness, your wholeness becomes their crisis. You didn't curse them. Your healing cursed their illusions. You didn't judge them. Your joy judged their emptiness. You didn't punish them. Your peace punished their chaos. This is what divine justice looks like. Not lightning bolts from heaven, not cosmic revenge, but the simple, undeniable truth that light exposes darkness wherever it shines. And you, chosen one, you are that light. Your very existence is proof that what doesn't kill you doesn't just make you stronger. It makes you dangerous to every lie that tried to define you. Declare this now. I don't chase justice. I become it. You want to know why they can't stop watching you? Why they scroll your life like it's their favorite show? Because deep down, they know. They know they lost something irreplaceable when they chose to be your enemy instead of your ally. They're not angry at what you became. They're angry at what they could have been if they had chosen differently. But here's what's about to happen next. Here's what they never saw coming. Your evolution isn't just changing you. It's changing everyone who witnesses it. Your healing isn't just personal. It's generational. And the power that's unlocking in you now, it's about to do something that will make everything we've talked about look like the opening act. Because you're not just becoming free. You're becoming the freedom that others have been praying for. You've been wondering why the world feels different when you walk into a room now. Why conversations stop mid-sentence. Why people who used to dismiss you suddenly watch your every move like you're carrying something they can't name but desperately want to understand. Here's what's happening, chosen one. You're not just healing anymore. You're not just surviving. You've become something they never accounted for in their small calculations of who you were supposed to be. You are the shift itself. Every room you enter now carries the weight of your transformation. Every word you speak lands with the authority of someone who's walked through hell and came back with fire in their bones. You're not telling people about change. You are the change they feel in their chest when you look them in the eye. They used to laugh at your sensitivity, called you dramatic, said you felt too much, cared too deep, loved too hard. But what they didn't understand is that sensitivity was your spiritual radar. You were picking up frequencies they couldn't even hear. You were seeing through the masks they wore so well, even they forgot their real face underneath. And now that same sensitivity has been forged into something unbreakable. You don't just see through lies anymore, you dissolve them by existing. Remember when they mocked your voice? When they told you to be quiet, stay in your lane, stop asking uncomfortable questions? They feared your voice because it carried something ancient, something that could wake people up from the spiritual coma they'd been living in. They feared your voice. Now they fear your silence. Because your silence isn't empty space anymore. It's pregnant with power. It's the kind of quiet that makes guilty consciences scream. The kind of stillness that forces people to face what they've been running from. Your presence alone has become a spiritual audit of everyone around you. You've stopped explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You've stopped defending your truth to those who profit from your confusion. And in that withdrawal, something magnificent happened. You became unreachable to their manipulation, untouchable to their games, unavailable to their drama. You're not waiting for permission. You are the interruption. God didn't send you here to fit into their broken systems. He sent you to break them, not with violence, not with noise, but with the kind of authentic power that makes everything fake crumble just by comparison. You walk into spaces now and people feel exposed without you saying a word. Your peace makes their chaos loud. Your clarity makes their confusion obvious. Your alignment makes their pretense painful to maintain. You've become what the prophet Elijah was when he stood against 450 false prophets on Mount Carmel. One person carrying real fire while everyone else played with matches. The odds looked impossible, but divine power doesn't count heads, it moves hearts. They thought they could bury you under their rejection. They thought your dreams would die in the isolation they created around you. They celebrated every door that closed in your face, thinking they'd finally contained the threat you represented to their comfortable lies. But isolation wasn't your punishment, it was your promotion. While they were busy networking with other broken people, you were being rewired by the Most High. While they were collecting validation from voices that didn't matter, you were learning to hear the only voice that does. While they were building empires on shifting sand, you were having your foundation rebuilt on something unshakable. And now you've emerged from that wilderness carrying something they can't buy, can't fake, can't steal. You've become the walking embodiment of what happens when someone chooses truth over comfort, when someone chooses healing over hiding, when someone chooses God's voice over the crowd's opinion. You are the thunder they mocked, now striking. Every time they said you'd never make it, they were speaking prophecy in reverse. Every time they counted you out, they were actually counting down to their own reckoning. Because the universe has a way of using our enemies' words as material for our comeback story. You're not the same person who got knocked down. You're not even the same person who got back up. You're the person who realized that being knocked down was just another position from which to rise higher than you ever could have standing on their approval. The power unlocking in you right now isn't new. It's ancient. It's the same force that parted the Red Sea, that brought down giants, that raised the dead. It's been sleeping in your spirit, waiting for the right season, the right pressure, the right level of desperation to wake it up. And they feel it. Oh, they feel it. The people who used to drain your energy now feel empty when you're not around. The ones who took your kindness for weakness now realize they were feeding off something sacred they'll never access again. The voices that used to drown out your truth now sound hollow compared to the authority you carry. You've become dangerous to every lie they built their identity on, threatening to every system that depends on keeping God's people small, terrifying to everyone who profits from spiritual slavery. But here's what makes this power different from anything they've ever seen. It's rooted in love, not revenge. It's built on healing, not hatred. It flows from a heart that's been broken open so wide that it can hold both justice and mercy at the same time. You're not coming for them with anger. You're coming with something worse, truth. And truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. It doesn't need to fight to win. It just needs to show up. And you, chosen one, are truth with skin on. You are the prophecy walking, the promise keeping its word, the prayer that finally got an answer. You are the shift that changes everything without trying to change anything. If you know this power is unlocking in you, type it like prophecy. I am the storm they never saw coming. Because what's happening next will prove that their greatest mistake wasn't underestimating you. It was giving you a reason to remember who you really are. You know what haunts them at 3 a.m.? Not what they did to you. What haunts them is how long you stayed, how much grace you gave, how many times you chose mercy when they deserved judgment. You held space for their redemption longer than heaven intended. You were their spiritual insurance policy, and they didn't even know it. Every time you chose forgiveness over fury, every time you bit your tongue when truth was burning on your lips, every time you stayed silent when you should have spoken fire, you were delaying their reckoning. They thought your patience was weakness, your endurance was desperation, your grace was gullibility. But chosen one, you were operating on frequencies they couldn't decode. You were their covering, their shield, their delay. The mercy you extended became their protection. Remember Joseph? Sold into slavery by his own blood, falsely accused, forgotten in prison. But God used his very presence to preserve nations. His forgiveness became the bridge between famine and abundance. That's what you were. A bridge, a buffer, a living, breathing grace period. But grace periods expire. And baby, your lease on their spiritual protection just ran out. You think it's coincidence that the moment you stepped back, their world started cracking? The second you stopped answering, their peace started shattering. The day you went silent, their secrets started screaming. That's not karma being late. That's karma being held back by your presence. You were the delay in their judgment. Now you're the trigger in their collapse. Every lie they told about you while you held them in prayer, those words are now eating them alive from the inside. Every scheme they whispered while you covered them in silence, those plots are now unraveling their own foundation. The spiritual realm doesn't play favorites, but it honors covering. And you, beautiful soul, You were unknowingly operating as their spiritual covering for years. But the moment you revoked access, the moment you stopped interceding, the moment you withdrew your energy, the floodgates of consequence burst open. You didn't curse them. You didn't hex them. You didn't even speak against them. You just stopped shielding them. And suddenly, every seed they planted in darkness started sprouting in broad daylight. Every manipulation they perfected started turning inward. Every poison they mixed for you started flowing backward into their own cup. That's not revenge, chosen one. That's return. The universe operates on perfect balance. For every action, an equal and opposite reaction. But your grace was interrupting that flow. Your forgiveness was absorbing their debt. Your silence was muffling their echo. Until now, David wrote in Psalm 35, "Let destruction come upon him unaware, and let his net that he hid catch himself." They set traps for your peace. Now they're falling into their own snares. They poisoned wells hoping you'd drink. Now they're choking on their own toxins. They built cages hoping to contain your light. Now they're locked inside their own prisons. And the key? You took it with you when you walked away. You ever notice how quiet it got when you stopped explaining yourself? How the room shifted when you stopped defending your truth? How the energy changed when you stopped trying to prove your worth? That wasn't submission. That was revocation. You pulled back the spiritual covering you didn't even know you were providing. And suddenly, they're naked in the storm they created. See, when chosen ones pray for people who persecute them, something supernatural happens. The prayers don't just go up, they create a dome of protection around the very people causing the pain. But you stopped praying for them, didn't you? Not out of bitterness, out of wisdom. You realized you can't pour healing water into a cup with holes in the bottom. You can't cast pearls before swine and expect them to become jewelry. You can't be the answer to someone else's prayer while they're actively cursing your existence. So you stepped back. You went silent. You withdrew. And that withdrawal, that was the most powerful thing you ever did. Because now the weight of their lies has nowhere to land except back on their own conscience. The energy they spent trying to destroy you has nowhere to go except back into their own atmosphere. The spiritual covering you unknowingly offered officially revoked. The grace period you unknowingly extended officially expired. The mercy you unknowingly provided officially withdrawn. And baby, they feel every ounce of that absence. You were their delay. Now you're their consequence. Not because you wished evil on them, but because you stopped absorbing the evil they wished on you. The same hands that hurt you are now shaking with anxiety. The same mouths that lied about you can't find peace in their own words. The same minds that plotted against you are now spiraling in confusion they can't escape. And you're watching from a distance, not with bitterness, but with the kind of clarity that only comes when you realize you were never the problem. You were the solution they rejected, the grace they abused, the covering they didn't deserve. But grace without boundaries becomes enabling. Mercy without limits becomes mockery. And God himself showed you when to close the door. If you know your exit unlocked their collapse, type, "I revoke the covering. I walk in power." Because chosen one, this is just the beginning. When you stop being their shield, you become their mirror. And what they see in that reflection, that's where the real unraveling begins. You know what they did to you, don't you? They didn't just hurt you. They didn't just betray you. They rewired your memory. They made you forget the royal bloodline flowing through your veins. Made you question the crown that was placed on your head before you took your first breath. You weren't denied the throne. You just forgot where the key was buried. And they knew exactly what they were doing. Every time they called you too much, they were erasing a line of code. Every time they made you feel small, they were deleting another file from your spiritual hard drive. Every betrayal was a virus uploaded to make you forget the access password to your own power. But baby, amnesia isn't permanent when the blood remembers what the mind forgot. You've been walking around like a prince living in poverty, begging for bread when you own the bakery, asking for permission to enter rooms you were born to own, apologizing for a light that was designed to blind demons and wake the dead. This programming they fed you, it didn't just hurt your feelings. It hijacked your identity, made you believe you were the problem when you were the solution they feared, made you think you were broken when you were the breakthrough they couldn't stop. They told you that your sensitivity was weakness, your tears were drama, your boundaries were attitude, your dreams were delusion. But what if I told you that every single thing they shamed you for was actually your superpower in disguise? What if your sensitivity was spiritual radar? Your tears were liquid prayers, your boundaries were divine protection, your dreams were prophetic downloads? What if the very thing they tried to kill in you was the thing heaven was trying to birth through you? This isn't a new gift being handed to you. Beautiful soul. This is an ancient inheritance returning to its rightful owner. This is DNA activation. This is bloodline restoration. This is your spiritual fingerprint finally matching the lock that's been waiting for you your whole life. God didn't give you this power yesterday. He's been restoring what was stolen from your memory banks before you even knew you'd been robbed. Remember Joseph, betrayed by his brothers, forgotten in prison, but the dreams never left him. Because dreams don't abandon dreamers. They wait, they incubate, they evolve in the dark until the moment heaven says, now. Remember David, overlooked by his own father, hunted by kings, hiding in caves, but even in the wilderness, he was practicing royal psalms, because you can't kill what God coded into the core. You are not learning, you are remembering. Every book that called to you, every video that made you cry, every stranger who saw something in you that your own family missed, every moment you felt that deep knowing that said, there's more to this story that wasn't education, that was excavation. They buried your truth under layers of their lies. But truth has roots deeper than deception can dig. And those roots have been growing in the dark, pushing up through concrete, breaking through every false foundation they tried to build over you. You know what's happening right now? As you're hearing these words, the access code is being restored. The password is being remembered. The locks are clicking open one by one. That tingling in your chest, that's not emotion, that's recognition. That's your spirit saying, finally, someone is speaking my language again. That fire in your belly, that's not anger, that's activation. That's power that's been waiting in standby mode, finally getting permission to come online. They thought they formatted your hard drive, but they didn't know about the cloud backup. They didn't know that heaven keeps receipts. They didn't know that what God downloads, man cannot delete. You've been asking God for strength when you already have the strength. You've been begging for wisdom when wisdom has been whispering in your ear for years. You've been praying for purpose when purpose has been pulsing in your veins since the day you were conceived. The power was never missing. The access was just blocked. But every attack they launched, it was actually clearing the cache. Every betrayal, it was deleting corrupted files. Every season of isolation, it was running a spiritual antivirus program, removing every lie that was preventing you from remembering who you really are. Beautiful soul, what you've lived through wasn't random chaos. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't because you deserved it. Every single moment of pain, every betrayal, every night you cried yourself to sleep, wondering if God had forgotten your name, it was all testimony. It was all preparation. It was all positioning you for this exact moment when the veil would be torn and you would finally see yourself through heaven's eyes. You are not a victim who survived. You are a warrior who conquered. You are not broken trying to heal. You are whole remembering your wholeness. You are not lost finding your way. You are found discovering what was always yours. The people who hurt you, who betrayed you, who made you question your sanity, your worth, your very existence. Their access to your energy is revoked. Their permission to your peace is canceled. Their subscription to your light has expired. That door is sealed, not with bitterness with boundaries, not with hatred with holiness, not with revenge with revelation that you were never meant to carry people who were committed to misunderstanding you. They thought they were writing your ending. They were actually witnessing your beginning. And the Lord says in Isaiah 54:17, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue which rises against you in judgment you shall condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord." You hear that? This is your heritage, not your hope, your inheritance, not your prayer, your promise. Every lie they spoke over you, condemned. Every scheme they plotted against you, failed. Every door they tried to close, irrelevant. Because when God opens what he opens, no man can shut. And baby, he just handed you the master key. So here's your spiritual declaration. Here's what you're going to speak over your life, not as a wish, but as a decree, not as a request, but as a royal proclamation. I am chosen. I am protected. I am powerful. I reclaim every piece of my peace they tried to steal. I step into every blessing they tried to block. I walk in the authority they never saw coming. This is my season. This is my time. This is my divine appointment with destiny. Say it. Mean it. Feel it rewiring your spiritual DNA as you speak. If this message shifted something in your spirit, if you felt that recognition deep in your chest, don't keep it to yourself. Share this with someone who needs to remember they're not crazy, they're chosen. Share it with someone who's been gaslighted into believing they're too much when they're actually not enough of who they really are. Hit that like button not just for the algorithm, but as a spiritual agreement, as a way of saying, yes, I receive this truth. Yes, I remember who I am. Yes, I'm ready for what's next. and drop in the comments, "I remember who I am." Let it be a declaration that echoes through cyberspace and lands in the spirit of every other chosen one who needs to hear that they're not alone in this awakening. Because here's what they never saw coming. Here's what they didn't calculate when they tried to dim your light, break your spirit, silence your voice. They weren't fighting you. They were fighting the force that chose you. They weren't attacking your weakness. They were triggering your activation. They weren't ending your story. They were editing out everything that wasn't worthy of the plot twist heaven had planned. And now the plot twist is here. You thought you were surviving. You were being prepared. You thought you were broken. You were being broken open. You thought you were forgotten. You were being remembered by the only voice that matters. The same hands that formed you in the womb have been reforming you in the fire. The same breath that gave you life has been breathing new life into every dead place they left behind. You are not the same person who started watching this video. You are not the same soul who clicked play hoping for a word that would help you make it through another day. You are awakened. You are activated. You are aligned. And they never saw you coming.